Good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Pleasance, and it is an honor to be here today. Thank you for inviting me. I am currently an investor. I'm currently a board member and an advisor and a co-founder of about 20 different companies that I work pretty closely with. I'm spending most of my time on 3 or 4 of them. I have been working on these for probably the last 6 months, but in earnest, I'm spending my full attention on these in the last 3 months, because previously, for the past 15, 17 years, I've been doing full-time jobs at big and small companies. Most recently, I was at the Walt Disney Company, where I was the co-president of Disney Interactive, running the games business there. I got to Disney almost 4 years ago by building a social game company called Playdom, which was a Facebook gaming company, and we sold that to Disney in 2010. Before that, I was in electronic arts, so I've been in gaming for about 7 years. The biggest other part of my career was spent in a company in the United States called Interactive Corp, and I was running Ticketmaster, which is the biggest ticketing company in the Western world. As a part of that, we also had services like Match.com and Evite and many other sort of disruptive internet models that I was overseeing. But that's kind of what I'm doing. Right now I feel more entrepreneurial than I do big company person.
Yeah, so hello everybody, my name is Jacobsson and I'm a partner and co-founder of SparkLabs. And before I've been involved in companies like Facebook, where I was running international business development and mobile in the very early days of that part. But I've also been involved in gaming for quite a while on the social gaming side. So companies like Open Faint that was acquired by Green a couple of years ago, I think. Crowdstar, and close advisor to King.com. And I tried to start my own company in the social gaming space, but things rapidly changed on the Facebook terms and services, and I decided not to continue. I gave it back to the term sheets. So I see myself, although I have shifted from an entrepreneur into investor right now, I still see myself very much as an entrepreneur in every aspect of this.
So my name is Frank Meehan. I'm also an investor and entrepreneur. So my previous venture capital firm that I worked at, I was on the boards of Spotify and Siri and Sumly, and I also sourced a company called DeepMind, which was an AI company sold to Google for $400 million a couple of weeks ago from London. And I am also a co-founder of SparkLabs, and we are at SparkLabs, we're as entrepreneurial as absolutely everyone else here. We are building a business to, as Hanji said, to a village to help the children grow. And that's something that I love to do. I love to work very, very closely, very passionate about working with entrepreneurs and helping them grow. I've been coming to Korea since 1998, and Korea now is very different to then. I can already see a very young, dynamic, entrepreneurial generation, which was not here at all in 1998. So, and that's hugely encouraging. It's why we're so passionate about encouraging Korea tech.
Yeah, I was excited about this panel because I cover East Asia and Southeast Asia for TechCrunch, and since a lot of startup industries throughout the region are fledgling, they're very new. I think there's a lot of kind of questions about how do they compare to the rest of the world, like how do they look in context? And since all 3 of you have worked with companies in a wide range of sectors, all across the world, you have a sense of that. So the first question I want to start off with is, you're involved with SparkLabs, SparkLabs Global. Why are you guys interested in Asia right now? What innovations excite you? I'm going to start with you, John.
Well, I'm just an advisor. These are the real guys. You sure don't want to start with them? I'm happy to go.
He's the real big. Yeah.
Well, I would say I'm excited to be a part of SparkLabs because I think it's the right time for this platform. These are all guys that I tremendously respect. They're very accomplished. They've all run businesses before, which I think is really important. And I love the idea that, first of all, businesses they take so much less capital today to create a business that can be disruptive in a major industry and disruptive globally. And they're happening everywhere. One of my friends is a guy named Chris Schroeder, who just wrote a book called Startup Rising, which is all about how the ecosystem is booming in the Middle East now, places where you wouldn't expect it. And I think it's the same all around the world. I think Asia has always been a very entrepreneurial community. My perspective that I look at Asia is sort of through the gaming lens. And online gaming and connected gaming and games as a service was built right here. And this is the place where it all started. So I think of Asia as being incredibly entrepreneurial. You need to have people on the ground in all locations around the world. And from all the companies we saw this morning, many of them have, well, they all I think have global aspirations. And so the idea that they can work with a group of people who can take their products and say, take the pictures one as an example. IncuPix. I mean, IncuPix wants to do that for the London Times as much as it wants to do it for a paper in Seoul. So having that kind of networking connection and to be able to move really quickly and rapidly at the seed stage, I think is just a really exciting thing right now.
Right. Yeah. No. So I've been back and forth to Asia for many years. Actually, as long as I can remember, the company I was a founding partner of a Chinese browser company called Maxton. That I got involved with the first seed investment from Skype in the early days, and we got Google to invest. At that time, we managed to bring it up to 30 million downloads, and today it's past 1 billion downloads. And it's been revenue, cash positive, very profitable for the last 6 years. And that was a very early stage, like mobile. And I got very fascinated by Asia, and I saw a lot of qualities, a lot of things coming out of Asia. But I felt sometimes that, in Silicon Valley, even throughout Europe, there was too little attention. People didn't understand Asia is like one country. That's one region. We have Asia, then we have Europe, and we have North America. That's definitely not so. Everybody knows that today. But I think things have changed a lot. There's a lot of maturity in companies in Asia that and connections into the Northern European, to the Northern American European market as well. Things that potentially can take off big, and it's also inspiring. North American European companies in a way that it didn't do before. So I'm very excited about what's going on here. I think in Korea it's see in a way. If I look at Israel, where I live, Korea is much more like Israel was 6 years ago. It's starting to take off. You feel the entrepreneurial spirit. There's still a lot of obstacles on the way. You feel like it's starting to cook. And you have all these people have been working for companies like LG, Samsung. They've got international experience. Maybe they studied in colleges in the US. Start traveling back and forth and start bringing a little bit of what you call like a Silicon Valley state of mind back into Korea. And I just feel like we're starting to see that is starting to take off in a meaningful way. And we're just excited to be part of helping build it and grow this ecosystem.
And Frank, you said you've been in Seoul for 16 years.
Wow, visiting, yeah.
Visiting Seoul for 16 years. Can you tell me basically what kind of changes have you seen and what do you see right now that's exciting?
I remember coming to Seoul in 1998 when I was with Ericsson and talking about 3G, which was still to launch back then. And I was going to meet a whole bunch of university students, and every single one of those students, I remember asking what they were going to do. They were all going to go work for one of the big corporates in Korea. And the word startup, I don't even think existed in the vocabulary. And then last year I came and I did a similar talk with a lunch with a number of university students. There was 20 of them, and 18 of them wanted to do a startup. Only 2 wanted to go and do the corporate, and 1 admitted it was because his dad was forcing him to, and if he could find a way of getting out of it, he was going to be trying to do it. But it was great, and it was so passionate. And then, at least half of those students were females as well. So, and then when we do and then we have the mixer days here with SparkLabs, when we get together, get the startup scene together. Again, there's like a huge, passionate culture here, and of startups. And what I really like is also, I've noticed this is heavily as well, starting to happen in Singapore and other key cities around Asia, obviously Shanghai as well, where the younger generation doesn't care about the older generation, what the older generation thinks. That they don't care that I'm 21 or 22, I can be the CEO of this company and I know I can do a good job because I'm marketing to my base. I'm selling this to a whole bunch of college students that know exactly what I'm talking about. And I don't have to wait until I'm 40 to start that company. And I think that's exactly what happens. And when that trend shifts, that's when it gets really exciting. And that's why I think Korea is one of the most exciting startup capitals in the world today.
Just for three of you, what do you think Seoul is doing right? Because it has been getting a lot of attention as a growing startup ecosystem.
It has soul. But it does. It has soul. It's got a real passion. There's a very unique thing here in Korea where you have a very, very strong work ethic. But it's very creative. I mean, look at the startups we've seen today, right? I do not know. I mean, I do a lot of demo days, a lot of accelerators. I've never seen a demo day where we have something to help you from snoring, from a gaming company to a media company to making sure that your 1,000 Facebook friends can feel you when they touch your finger. So I mean, you just don't see that anywhere else, and I think that's fantastic. That eclectic mix of startups is great.
Yeah, no, I feel like exactly the same thing that Frank has said here. So it's really, things are really starting to take off. There's an infrastructure. I know that the government is extremely supporting with the startup community. That is not always a positive thing. It's a double-edged sword, but I think it helps a little bit somehow. And seeing that, more and more. I mean, I have a friend who was a VP at LG, and he left a couple of years ago to make his first startup. He was around 40 years old, and everybody at LG said, "Hey, you're crazy. It's like suicide. You can never. If you fail, nobody will look at you again. Nobody will talk to you. You can't go back into corporate life again." But he's very happy doing his startup, and it's changing. So I see that's very, 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 very positive.
I just echo the same thing. It feels now like people really are leaving big companies and they want to take these kinds of risks. Again, I've only been coming to Seoul for 14 years. 17 years? I'm like 6 or 7 years. But again, the lens I look at it through, when I was at Electronic Arts was the first time I came to Seoul, and the only connected service game that Electronic Arts had back then, and still its biggest one, was FIFA Online, run in conjunction with NeoWiz here in Seoul. That's how Electronic Arts learned the entire thing of games as a connected service. Fast forward to a couple of years when I went to Disney, one of the first things I did is I looked at our business. Asia is the largest gaming market in the world, and Disney's business here was basically zero. So what do you do when you have an opportunity problem like that? You call Jimmy. You say, "Jimmy, I've got a big problem over here. Jimmy, sort me out." So Jimmy was able to connect me with great people. John Shi here, who is a partner at Disney from Smilegate, where we're doing a huge game together, a huge online connected game. We acquired a small studio here called Studio X with some of Jimmy's ex-colleagues, a very entrepreneurial studio. We partnered with Zippy for a racing game. The point is, the entire Asian strategy from a development standpoint was anchored in Seoul. You would think it would have been China, but it wasn't. It was anchored here. So I think it's a very rich and vibrant economy.
What advantages did it have over China?
Great developers here. I mean, I think again, it went back to online and connected gaming was founded here. A lot of these games do big money in China, but they're mostly built here. And I think there's a history of that, and there's there are people that just have that knowledge.
So just taking the question I asked about what Seoul is doing right and flipping around, what do you think founders and entrepreneurs here, what do you think that they need to do better in order to ensure the continued growth of the ecosystem?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously there is a big difference. I mean, I'm living in a country like Israel, which is known as like the startup nation. And I know a lot of people in Korea talk about the startup nation, and I meet all these Koreans coming to Israel wanting to know what's going on, why is Israel so successful as a startup environment. And one of our biggest advantages is that, there is no rank. There is no respect for any rank, not even for the prime minister. Sometimes that's not a good thing, but it's equal. And that breeds a lot of creativity, cultural backgrounds and so on. I think that the big challenge that I feel in Korea is because of the cultural heritage of failure or failing and so on, that is somehow inhibiting innovation to a certain extent. People are not, but I'm seeing that changing now. It's like Frank said, younger people are getting more bullish. They don't really care. I don't have to go into big corporate jobs. I'm not afraid so much to fail. What they really need is more of that support, more of that encouragement that it's okay. You don't have to join the big ranks. It's good for experience, but you can start your company. Venture capital is starting to come in and really support. And we just need to encourage all entrepreneurs here that it's okay to fail, be more bold, think big, think global from day one. Don't think only about the Korean market, but think big. Your idea has huge potential globally.
This is a question for someone, I don't know who, because I don't know the answer to it at all. what is the university system like here in terms of its encouraging entrepreneurial endeavors? So for example, people point to Silicon Valley, but Stanford is kind of the mecca of encouraging people to take those kind of risks, and it's sort of it's ingrained in the actual curriculum.
I think we should, let's ask the audience, so do you guys think the university system here encourages entrepreneurship?
Yeah.
No, the general consensus is no.
I think
Hands up if anyone thinks it does.
I think that's a really big part of
Yeah.
the formula. So you got to have government support, you have to have infrastructure, you have to have venture capital, you have to have the belief in the ethos that you can go do these things. But the university system is where this really should be started. That's the ground. So I think that's maybe the opportunity for Seoul.
What do you Frank, like, what do you think people in Korea could be doing better in terms of?
Well, I mean, how many here are actually in a startup or working in a startup? So roughly, probably about a little bit around about half. And how many? I think I think one of the key things that I always find with a system that's just starting up is how do you get access to the information? Like how do you get access to what to do right or wrong? I think that's the key thing. And in something like Silicon Valley, there is a huge amount of people who share experiences all the time. There's meetups after meetups after meetups. And that's something that we would like to try and encourage and foster as much as possible, because half of you are here, and I'm sure half of you always are wondering different questions. So I think the key thing is ask. And I know I'm going to get deluged, but the best thing is just ask Jimmy. As John said, just sounds like an episode of Sopranos. Just call Jimmy. But I think that's the key thing is just ask. Don't try and operate in a vacuum. That's one of the key things that you might feel like when the scene is just starting up. But you do need to just reach out all the time.
This might be a business idea. It's going to start with another question for the audience. In Silicon Valley, a friend of mine runs a company called Plug and Play, which is a massive facility that houses something like 400 startups inside of it. And those kinds of facilities are popping up now in New York and sort of all over the place.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, does such a thing exist here like that? Is there some giant, literally facility that provides all the infrastructure that can house hundreds of startups? Does that exist here?
It's sort of ample.
Not 400 though. Not that. 40 company in one building. Founders
Okay, well, let's start.
By the way, that's a great business for someone here. My friend Sai, he does it because he gets to see all those companies flowing through there, and he knows exactly which ones are working. So anyhow, might be a good, if someone here wants to go do that, it's a good business.
So the things that we just talked about, like universities not encouraging entrepreneurship, kind of like a culture that kind of makes it hard to take risks. I mean, that's a common theme whenever I talk to people throughout Asia, whether it's Korea, China, Taiwan, Southeast Asia. It's a common theme. It's hard for people to take risks because for cultural reasons and also for financial reasons. There's a lack of VC funding. If you're taking money from your family, obviously you're not going to, I think startup founders are told to accept and embrace failure, but that's not something you can do when you're using, your parents' money. So I was wondering, just basically, when you look at startup ecosystems, what do you think a country or city, what factors do you need to have in order to grow a promising startup ecosystem? Do you think that, is it necessary to have like a strong tech industry and government support?
I think it's a combination. I mean, Ned's going to talk about Israel, because I invested in Israel 4 or 5 years ago, and it is become the startup nation. But I also talk about London. So London has transformed itself into the top 3 tech city now. So it's San Francisco, New York, and now London is also becoming the center of, in terms of number of startups in the world, and it's also becoming the center of financial tech. It's ruling a particular sector. There's a lot of money being pumped in there. And 5 years ago, that was absolutely not the case. And there was a number of things that happened. So firstly, the government basically said that you will get, so if you invest $100,000, you get 50% back in tax credits, basically. So, so if I invest $100,000, I get $100,000 of value, but I'm effectively only paying $50,000. So that's a massive incentive for, that sort of government stimulus is It's highly required, I think. Number two, the government needs to, I think it was pretty indicative here that not a single person put up their hand that universities encourage entrepreneurship. So I think that was it's a great question, and that needs to be happening as the number two thing. There needs to be much more focus on that. Otherwise, it's like, Korea's not going to be keeping up with the rest of the world, which is rapidly turning into a very startup, entrepreneurial-led business world. And then number three, the corporates, in London got involved, very heavily involved. So firstly, the UK government put a huge amount of funding into entrepreneurial education, encouraging all the business schools and universities to run entrepreneurial courses, and there's huge amounts now. And then third, the corporates got involved. They started really putting the money into investing into startup accelerators, etc. And those three things haven't really happened here yet. So the startup community is working on its own, basically, with the exception of a few. So like us and Nano Foundation, etc., they're the ones that are going to be leading this, and just by being part of stuff like this makes a massive difference, because they will be encouraging and moving stuff forward, and we just need the other corporates to start doing that as well.
I think there's also a side of it, is just making sure the government is not highly bureaucratic and letting young companies start up. And I think, and you put it in way better than I do, but in Paris is sort of the classic example right now, I'm told, where entrepreneurs in Paris are basically all moving to London because it's just such a pain in the ass to do business in France.
Because government helps in the UK, right, and in Paris it just stops it.
Right. So the question is here, is the government facilitating and helping beyond cash? Just in terms of all setting up this ecosystem. Because that could be a big hurdle too, I don't know.
And I think another example, Helsinki Finland is my new favorite example of a country that is in the past they have a very strong engineering culture. Most of them have been working for companies like Nokia and so on. But culturally they have kind of been at the end of the world in a way, and kind of a little bit shy and difficulty to kind of like be out there networking and show themselves. But with Nokia and traveling back and forth, getting a lot of international exposure, working on different problems, and eventually when Nokia started to kind of, in a way fall apart and change, that gave rise to an enormous startup system or ecosystem in Helsinki that's very exciting. And you see, obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is all the gaming companies coming out of Finland. And all of them, half of them have been working at Nokia. And we have a lot of potential here as well. Look at all the people who've been working for LG, Samsung, and so on. Great engineering culture. All what they need to do is to get encouragement to go out. And I think examples like what Frank mentioned here, and support, maybe even like big public places, open spaces to work. Not necessarily with no strings attached. Just let people gather together, give them a place like a Google campus in London, where just naturally bumping into people working on startups, encouraging other. A big mentoring system, a support system, very important. And so I think the ingredients for a successful cocktail is already here. Just need to give it a little time.
So just going from the ecosystem to talking about founders, John and Nat, you've been involved in M&As, and Frank, working with Horizons, you've worked as an advisor. You've been an advisor to companies like Assembly. And was DeepMind one of them also? DeepMind, yes. Recently got acquired by Google. So I was wondering, just in terms of founders, when you're looking at founders and companies and founding teams, what do you like? What are the common elements that make them successful?
John,
Vision, passion, and a tremendous hands-on quality to what they're actually building. Not every founder is necessarily an engineer, but they have to be very steeped in, I'm thinking mostly in software companies, they have to be very, very steeped in product and technology. Or you can be the chief product officer, you can be the chief technology person, but you're sort of in that camp. You really built other products, and I guess in track record. I mean, people tend to repeat their success, right? And success begets success, and so I think those would be the first things I would put up. And I'm sorry, one last thing. How well the team works, right? Because it's never one founder. There's always a core group of people. There's always 2, 3, 4 people. And then that is the nucleus that's going to decide whether the company is successful or not.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. For me, it's like you can sometimes meet a company that is working on a very interesting product, potentially a huge market opportunity, but the founding team doesn't have that, that nerve. They don't have that passion. You feel immediately that something is missing. And if I were to break anything down to one single thing, it's the founders. It's who is the team, what is people, can they make it through all the obstacles that's going to come, there is to run a startup, all the iteration and that happens through the startup cycles. So that's the number one thing, we have a killer instinct, we have to make it regardless of what. Product market fit, do they understand, do they have domain specific knowledge of the market they're addressing? And that is a huge market. If it's are they addressing a huge market opportunity? Those are the things. But again, it all comes down to the DNA of the team.
And the ability to communicate their idea. The ability to communicate the idea incredibly quickly is fundamental. The number of times, because we have to see a lot of startups, and the number of times you sit there and, after the first 15 minutes, you still have no idea what this guy's talking about, and after an hour, I have no idea. So after the first thing, I'm gone anyway. So, but I think you've got to communicate it effectively, incredibly quickly, because if they can communicate it to you incredibly effectively, they can communicate it to whoever is their end user, right? And if they can't do it to you, they can't do it to the end user. It's the end of the story. And I think something, their ability to think of something, just that's really, really key. Something like One Day, One Song, it's like it says what it does on the tin. Like, I don't even have to explain it. That type of understanding of the market which they're going after and the consumer, the end point, the consumer is fundamental.
So all of the, founders that you work with are obviously talented. They have the characteristics that you guys just mentioned, but I guess without naming names, can you tell me about some of the most common mistakes besides communication, common mistakes, or maybe some of the most egregious errors or kind of like mix-ups that the people you've worked with, you've seen them make?
Well, I'll start what you guys want to say. I could go on for quite some time, but on this one. But I'm going to go for one. So I'll probably get into loads of trouble with this one, but every year Silicon Valley chucks a huge amount of money at one company that hasn't launched, and either it does really, really well, or it does really, really badly. This year's looks like it's going to be a thing called Clinkle, and obviously we've had Color, and we've had a whole bunch of other stuff, usually starting with C. But basically what happens is there's too much money, and the company loses it loses focus. Like, all the best startups I've known generally are starting from very, very lean principles, and they have to stay very focused. I think that the big, sometimes when it happens that they get a lot of money, they suddenly lose focus because there was so much money and they never had any beforehand, and now the money gets thrown on too many products, too many ideas, and it should actually just be, we're giving it to you for growth. We like your product, go grow. Like, don't do anything else too much here, okay? I think that lack of, that staying on focus, staying on message, which I loved with Spotify, the founders at Spotify, incredibly focused. The founders at Skype that I knew as well, as you do as well, incredibly focused no matter how much money they had. And of course Facebook and Twitter, it's the same thing. So the most successful ones will stay on track, stay on target.
I'll throw two out. You have to listen. I think a lot of times people get enamored with their ideas and they're focused, but they're totally stuck on it and they're not taking the input that is there. In this day and age, we all know it's the lean startup mentality, right? You can put products out, you can iterate very quickly, you can get a lot of feedback. Look, everybody's startup idea is at least 50% wrong, kind of out the gate, right? You're going to have to course correct, and you've got to get data early, and you've got to be able to actually hear it instead of putting plugs in your ears. So that's the one. The second one is just when people get excited and then they raise capital, obviously they're looking to scale the business, so they go out and they hire a bunch of people, and you hire the wrong people. That is a killer, right? Because the B player hires C players, and the C player hires D players, and that whole thing. And so just being relentless on keeping the team at super high quality is critically important.
Why did they end up hiring the wrong people?
They're more concerned with ramping to their idea than they're putting speed in front of quality, basically. We all do it. We've all done it. I think everyone's been in that situation. But it's just, I don't think there's anything more important or can lead to failure faster than getting wrong.
Yeah, one thing I think related to the funding side is also that either there are kind of two ways. Well, either they're raising too late, they're starting to raising the fund. Some of them get over obsessed with the valuation and maybe reject funding at an early stage when they really could raise money. And then eventually things have changed. Half a year down later, things have changed. The metrics are not as successful as they are, as you submit iteration, and suddenly you have metrics that it doesn't matter what vision you're selling, the investor is going to look, okay, you only have this many downloads, this is the engagement rate, and suddenly you find yourself, in a situation where you're running, just desperately trying to raise. So you're raising sometimes too late, and it's too obsessed with the right valuation, and not getting diluted too early. But what you really need is like a friend of mine says that when they're passing around, when they pass around the plate with the hors d'oeuvres, take two and put one in the pocket. Like you need all that fuel that you can get, because you never know what's going to happen next year.
You got to remember it's in your pocket, because if you put a deviled egg in your pocket and you forget the next morning, it's not good.
Yeah, I've done that, and especially chocolates. But the other thing, so just come back to John's point about hiring is super critical. Like I've met some founders who are the best, who's the best CEO, the best marketer, the best technical, the best CTO, the best product dude. Like they're the best at freaking everything, right? And of course they're not. And it's just trying to get them to understand that's the wrong way to do it. The best thing is that if you're a great leader, and you've seen some great leaders and some great teams up here today, and I think common across what we try to do in SparkLabs in terms of our teams is we try to find it's people who can lead and set direction, but can find people who are better than them, right? It's always about finding someone who's better than you at technology, or better than you at marketing, or better than your product, and then that is going to be incredibly impressive with investors. That's what they want to see. They want to see a team. Like, we never take on single founders because we're not interested in single founders. We're interested in teams. And those founders, their ability to find people that are better than them is amazing, right? And if you look at, Facebook really took off when Mark brought in Cheryl, and just immediately off it goes, right? And the same thing with Google, right? When Larry and Sergey brought in Eric Schmidt, and bam, off it goes, because they knew that he was the CEO, right? They knew that he was the one to take him to growth, right? So that's what I think you have to do. It's super important.
So I think that's what we were just talking about kind of leads into the next question that I wanted to ask about, which is the challenges of launching a company in an ecosystem that's still growing, like Seoul, maybe Shanghai, Beijing, one that's kind of strong but still young, and then figuring out how you scale it globally, because that's definitely something that I see in Taipei. Founders there, they have great ideas, they have great resources in terms of hardware and software development, but they just don't know which markets to tackle. And then of course there's also other, strategic problems too. So I was wondering just what kind of problems have you seen among companies that are trying to figure out how to scale up, and what do you think they should try to do or think about?
Well, get your home market done first, right? So let's go back to Mimivox. So, Mimivox, if you think about it, they came here and launched March last year, first class. This is literally a year ago, right? Quickly killed it in Korea, saw inbound interest from other markets, did an amazing effort to get to be the first Korean company to get into Y Combinator, incredible. And then to be top 3 out of 64 companies voted by their peers and investors, that's amazing, right? Now, I think that is the way to scale, incredibly smart. They went in there and they found a way to, instead of trying to walk into Silicon Valley and do it on their own, they went in there and they got themselves into the biggest networked bunch of individuals in Silicon Valley, who suddenly networked them out into their group, right? I think that's the way to do it. You go in there and you have to find a way to get the ecosystem working for you when you scale out.
That resonates with me, which is the word I was going to say was partnerships. I'm associated with a company now that we're actually building in the States, but it's in the gaming space, and it's going to work very, very closely with partners in Asia. And so in that case, we're borrowing technology, we're sourcing, we're using the partner to source content, rather than thinking we can go do it all on our own, and try to like set up shop here and back west at the same time. So that notion of really understanding who your partners are when you're trying to do something at a global scale or break out of your market that you're normally in, I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, and then the same example, I'll take an example of Maxton, the browser I was part of years ago. Was a total Chinese company, and we were launching around the same time as Firefox launched. Although Maxton actually invented tab browsing, nobody knows that, but that's the guys, the brilliant engineers, but zero marketing skills. If you put an opportunity in front of them, they couldn't see it. And obviously, I came out there as a total outsider. So, well, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? And I started to travel all over, evangelize, getting it in front of the right type of people. I knew nobody in Silicon Valley, but it was just a lot of hustling. Hustling, meaning identifying the right type of partners, who could be distribution partners, and just lucky running into the right type of individuals that then helped me, like Frank said, here to network. And suddenly, Maxton, at least during a couple of years, was a name internationally. Although in the end, we realized that the team's core DNA was never really made for going truly global. But hey, listen, that's not so bad when you have a Chinese market and you say the biggest browser in China. So focus only in China, and that's good enough. But it's really about like being fearless. Go out there, look for help, ask for help. There's a lot of people that want to help you, but if you don't ask for it, nobody's going to just walk up to you and help you. It's like,
So we've been talking a lot about start founders and which ecosystems look the most promising. So just kind of like moving on from that question, what about marketplaces? What marketplaces do you think have the most potential? I mean, or have the most growth potential?
When you say marketplaces, you mean product marketplaces? Like Uber or something? Or
like for example, which places, which regions of the world should startups be looking at to expand into?
Geography, it's a country question,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, sure. Yeah.
I'm thinking. I'm punting to these guys.
Well, I think it depends on who you are. So if you're a US company, you want to go to Asia, I think it depends on what you're doing. I mean, there's so many different factors involved, but I don't know really. I mean, if you're a Korean company, you want to go global, I think you have to think about the US. I think you have to think about Singapore.
Jimmy's not happy. Jimmy wants to change the questions or something.
Yeah. What is that?
He's putting a cane up.
Final question, and then I think we'll open it up to audience questions.
Jimmy's getting bored with
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it totally depends on what market you're in, what type of product, where you come from. I mean, in a certain sense, for Korean companies, the closest market maybe will be Japan in many aspects. Then maybe continue into Indonesia if you're in the mobile space. If you are in the gaming space, like Indonesia has been very successful even for Facebook. Facebook is like huge in Indonesia. Even companies that had kind of in a way failed in the US, like a company like Path, that eventually didn't really take off in the US as expected, but hey, they have quite a big user base in Indonesia, and that's not what Path exactly. Yeah. So it all depends on what the company's doing, what type of products, and Europe is Europe. It's not a country. It's a very fragmented market, so maybe it's not the first thing that a company in Asia will think about, unless they're maybe like fintech. You want to target the UK perhaps, gaming, yeah, and so forth.
So I've got an idea for an app, which is simply call Jimmy. Anytime you need any advice, just call Jimmy. So should we go to the audience? Has anyone got any questions? I'll run around with a mic. Here we go. There you go.
신유진이라고 하는데요. 페이스북이 얼마 전에 오큘러스 VR을 인수를 하고 저커버그씨가 차세대 인터넷 플랫폼은 가상현실이다 그렇게 선언을 했는데 그렇게 선언한 거에 대해서 어떻게들 생각하시는지 가상현실의 차세대 플랫폼으로서의 가능성에 대해서 어떤 생각들을 하고 계시는지 궁금합니다.
I'll translate. So, Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook just bought Oculus, and he said the virtual world is supposed to be the next frontier.
I just want to hear your opinion on the acquisition and Mark's comment about virtual worlds.
Yeah, I got a lot of questions on that one, and many times I've actually declined to comment on it, at least in the media. I know that we are not on record really here, so I feel more comfortable here. But some people will say either he has an extreme vision where things are going, and that is the next user interface and that's the next platform. And some people will say, well, he can because he has dough, and it's a reaction towards Google Glasses and Google platform. And I think maybe it's a combination of both. Knowing Mark, I think that he's very futuristic. He's really looking. Mobile was the second big platform for Facebook that in a way jumped on too late, but that caught up very, very nicely. And he's just looking at what's next ahead. I frankly think that it's too early. It's way too early. I don't think that the consumer market is ready for those type of, you might expect, maybe for gamers. But there's a lot of issues with those type of devices where, with balance, putting it on, people feel ill and stuff like that. It's very exciting, but I think it's like light years away from being the next platform.
I remember when that happened, and I read the announcement, and the first thing I thought of was, if I was in those shoes and had an option to buy a company like that, I thought the company that would make sense was GoPro.
Yeah, right.
I thought that was, I think that thing is such a, does everyone here know what GoPro is? The camera that you wear on your head? It's just an amazing video product, and it creates this whole new types of content that just seems like they would really fit in with something like Facebook.
I have another company for you. So, any other questions, Gus? Yep.
I just want to hear your thoughts about the notion of startup within the enterprise. Whether you think it works, if so, why? If it doesn't work, why do you think it doesn't work?
I've seen a lot of initiatives by big corporations trying to be innovative by creating a lab internally and be entrepreneurial and ask other people to be a little bit more hip, like hipsters, and I've never seen that working for any big corporation. It's too close to the corporate, to the mothership, and they usually don't get that freedom to do what they really want to do. It never takes off inside a corporation. Maybe in a small scale, but I don't really believe in that in that space. If that's what you mean by like the enterprise. It has to be independent. It has to be totally independent.
Yeah, I mean, I used to work in a very big corporation, and I tried it, and I think the problem is that I think most corporates now in the US and the UK, I mean, they all have done it. They've all tried to do startups within their own space, and they've all failed. And now I think they're now moving on to actually buying companies and bringing them in. Because the problem is it's extremely difficult to attract the right talent if you don't have the right motivation for them, right? And so that the corporates will not give the right share structure, the right options, the right packages for the entrepreneurs. So why am I going to do that? I'd rather go and join Google and Facebook. At least I'm getting something. Or I'd rather go and join another startup. I'm not going to get anything out of it. And the corporates have finally realized their structure can't do it. And the other main problem that happens is not from any lack of help, but these corporates are massive, and their finance and legal teams are built to handle massive, huge businesses. Yet they try to put the startup machine underneath the finance and legal. And of course, you need to do a contract tomorrow, not in 6 weeks and 6 months, which is what they're usually used to. So, the speed of execution is incredibly difficult for the apparatus. I think the will is there, but they don't realize the apparatus is just not set up to do it. I think is one of the biggest issues.
I'm going to agree with both my colleagues here. One quick story, which I was the beneficiary of. I was the CEO of Ticketmaster. Actually, first the CEO of a company called Ticketmaster Online City Search, which was separate from Ticketmaster, and my major shareholder and boss at the time was a guy named Barry Diller. He's the one who actually put this deal in place where we took this City Search company, kind of a progressive internet company, and married it with the online ticketing rights from this big company, Ticketmaster, and broke it into a separate company, moved the building 30 miles across Los Angeles, and took that company public We ultimately, 4 years later, came back and bought the parent company, Ticketmaster. But the amount of, it was so tense, but it was the only way, you know, we ended up going from 0% of tickets sold online to 75% of tickets sold online in less than 4 years. It never would have happened at all if there was not a dedicated 300 people that had that as their sole mission to go do. And so it just, again, it's kind of reinforcing, you have to, it has to be autonomous, it has to have a purpose, and it has to have its own incentive. My last thought is just, I think it also just comes down to leadership inside these big companies. Sometimes I've been in those positions to be the leader, and sometimes, you know, I've been in, we all have bosses and leaders around us. As Frank says, everybody wants to be innovative. I think the leader has to make it so. It'll never be as good as breaking something off, right? But usually in my roles, I've had 7 or 8 businesses at the same time. You have to treat them all as if they're their own businesses and do everything in your power to rip apart that corporate bureaucracy, that legal department, that finance, that quarterly thing, yada yada. Reward people for what they're doing on their specific business and their specific product. And I think big companies don't do a great job of this. Maybe Jack Welch in America was one who sort of started this at General Electric. He got this thing kind of going, but it's something that I really respect when big corporate leaders can behave that way, because it's not always the way it happens.
Other questions, guys? Yep.
Last question.
He says last question, Frank.
네. 너무 고마운 말씀 감사드리고요. 네. 그냥 굉장히 엉뚱한 질문일 수 있습니다. 지금 이 순간에도 화면에는 프로젝션이 돼 있고 지금 말씀하신 모든 그런 말씀들이 어떤 인터넷, 온라인이 다 전제가 되어 있는 것 같습니다. 전기하고 인터넷이 없었을 때 스타트업은 어떤 것을 모색을 해야 될까요? 저희 같은. 전기하고 인터넷이 없으면.
So he's asking a question. If we had no electricity or no internet, what would be a startup? What would you imagine a startup would be defined by that?
You'd try to stop snoring.
If you don't have, I will start with electricity. It's a fantastic platform. It's very scalable, it's global, and it's part of our lives.
Okay, wrap it up.
I think we should just give one more big round of applause to all the companies that were up here earlier. I thought it was a great day. I thought all 7 were fantastic presentations, and I know a lot of people here put a lot of work supporting these people. So I would just personally say thank you, and let's give them a round of applause.
And thank you everyone for coming today as well. Much appreciated.
Okay, 그 Catherine Shu한테도 고맙다는 말씀 전하고요. 테크런치에서 또 이렇게 우리 찾아주셔서 감사하고. 오케이, 저기 그 어나운스먼트가 몇 개 있습니다. 구글 글라스 저희 아시다시피 이제 구글 글라스가 아마 여기서 체험해 보신 분도 있을 텐데 저희 스타트업 엑셀러레이터 프로그램을 보시던지 아니면 저 마루 180에 보시면은 이 구글 글라스를 직접 체험해 보시고 또 이걸 어떻게 이용해서 또 어떤 애플리케이션을 할 수 있는지 기회를 드리니까 그냥 부담 갖지 마시고 저희 오피스에 찾아오셔서 김윤신 형이나 아니면 최윤희 차장님을 찾으시면은 체험하실 수 있습니다. 또 이러한 해외에서 나와 있는 상품들을 계속 지속적으로 갖고 오도록 하겠습니다. 그리고 또 한 가지 어나운스먼트는요. 업다코라고 이거는 오히려 엑셀러레이터보다도 더 앞단위에, 더 초창기에, 그러니까 스타트업을 생각하고 계신데 이거 도대체 뭐부터 걱정해야 되고 뭘 어떻게 해야 되는지. 뭐냐면 저희들이 엑셀러레이터 프로그램을 받는 사람들은 어느 정도 좀 준비가 된 사람들도 모아져 있고 아이디어도 있고 그런 분들을 갖다 모으잖아요. 근데 그런 생각을 하신 분들이 코칭을 받고 싶다 하시든지 아니면 멘토링을 받고 싶으시면은 업다코라는 프로그램이 있습니다. 이거는 구글에서 굉장히 많이 지원하는 프로그램인데 그 챕터를 이제 한국에서 저희 이번 4월달에 SparkLabs가 시작을 하게 됩니다. 그래서 이 프로그램의 취지는 뭐냐면은 오히려 엑셀러레이터보다 더 전 단계, 지금 스타트업을 생각하고 계신 분들 그리고 이 스타트업에 대해서 어떻게 하는 건지에 대해서 코칭을 받는 이건 근데 돈을 내는 프로그램이에요. 근데 돈이 한 200불, 그러니까 한 20만 원 정도 돈을 내고 이제 300불, 30만 원 정도 돈을 내시고 이제 강의를 듣거나 아니면 이렇게 같이 이렇게 대화를 나눌 수 있는 프로그램에서 그게 업다코가 언제 시작한다고요? 우리 4월 29일 날 시작을 합니다. 또 거기에 관심이 있으신 분들은 저희 스파크랩에 컨택해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 네, 이렇게 오늘 정말 수고 많으셨고요. 다시 한번 우리 회사들을 위해서 네? I'm sorry. So one more. So we actually struck up a partnership with Sandor, and Sandor Font is one of the biggest font. 잠깐만요. 그 저기 산돌 커뮤니케이션은 그 한국에서 그 펀트 파운드리를 가장 활발하고 크게 이제 그 사업을 하시는 그 사업이고 아마 그 스티브 잡스 영화 보셨으면은 펀트가 얼마나 중요한지 아마 그 보셨을 텐데 그 펀트 잘못 하나 골랐다고 완전히 막 쫓겨나고 그러잖아요. 저도 굉장히 개인적으로 그 펀트에 대해서 굉장히 좋게 생각하고 그래서 우리 스타트업들한테 그 펀트를 지원해 주시기로 하셨고요. 그래서 오늘 산돌 대표님이 여기 나와 계십니다. 여기 산돌 대표님. 모시겠습니다.
네, 금방 소개받은 산돌 커뮤니케이션의 석모 대표입니다. 저희가 재능 기부의 일환으로 여기 스파클랩 통해서 기업을 시작하시는 스타트업 기업들에게 시장에서 안착하실 때까지 안심하시고 국내 최고의 수준의 품질의 펀드를 가지고 사업을 하실 수 있도록 저희가 기부를 하게 되었습니다. 이런 기회를 주셔서 오히려 감사합니다. 감사합니다.